Thank you.
Okay, and Philip, in which war did you serve?
World War II.
World War II. And what was your branch of service?
I wound up in the Air Force, which originally was the Army Air Corps.
Okay, perfect. And what was your highest rank when you got out of the service?
First lieutenant.
Okay. So, can you just tell me where you served, just general locations?
Yeah. I was drafted in November of 1941, and I was still in a boot camp in Long Island when the war broke out on December 7th. I was transferred from there to Washington, D.C., to Anacostia, outside of Bowling Field was the name of the place.
Bowling Field.
Bowling Field in Anacostia, in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. From there, I was lucky enough that they had started expanding the Army Air Corps, because we had very few combat units. In fact, we had no combat units at that time. And I was sent down Bowling Field, and from there I took a test. They were looking to increase their non-flying personnel, because they have to run bases as well as being pilots. So they divided that up. And I took a test where you had to have a two-part test. You had to have a certain IQ, and take the two tests, pass both of them, and then go through an interview. Why you wanted to go be an officer, which sounds very strange to me. From there I was sent down to Miami Beach, Florida, where they had established a school there for the 90-day wonders, as they called them.
90-day wonders?
90-day wonders. You went through the school for 3 months, and then you got a commission. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant.
So you must have passed the test.
I passed the test, yes. And I was sent down to Florida, and I spent the 90 days there going through school, graduated from that, and upon my graduation, I was discharged from the Army Air Corps with the right to become, for the convenience of the government, to become an officer. From there, when I graduated, I was assigned to, the first assignment was to Will Rogers Field out in Oklahoma. This was a brand new field, and it was actually won by an old Army general who really believed that the Air Corps wasn't the way to fight a battle. Wars were won on the ground. From there I was assigned to another base in Jacksonville, Florida. And from there finally to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The airport was there. From there, the invasion, of course, that was about to start against Africa, North Africa. So in 1942, in December of 1942, I was in on the invasion at Casablanca.
You were in on that invasion?
Yes. Okay. It was a 2-day invasion. One was one in November, and the other was in December. Then from there, I went across North Africa, from Oran, Algiers, Bizerte, and wound up in Tunisia when the war in North Africa came over. Then I was transferred to an outfit that invaded Corsica. At the time, Churchill was yelling for the underbelly of Europe. That's what, for the war. He didn't want it to start in the north like it was. But so they started to capture the islands in the Mediterranean. So I got into the invasion of Corsica. And we were doing air-sea rescue of any planes that were shot down in the Mediterranean. Then when they had committed those in Sicily, and the invasion of Italy had begun, we were shipped back to Africa and then sent up to Bari in Italy.
Bari?
Bari, which is on the east coast of Italy. Then I was assigned to another air group, the 324th Fighter Group, which had 324th had actually started from Connecticut and went all around Africa and went in. He landed into Egypt, and they developed from Egypt, Egypt, and they went up to North Africa, and till the war ended in North Africa. Then I joined the 324th Group outside of Rome, and we went on the invasion of southern France. They landed in a place in St. Joseph's. We went up the Rhone Valley. We had 3 squadrons. And each squadron would hop to various bases as they went up along the line off through France. Then we went eastward to Alsace-Lorraine.
Sorry?
Alsace-Lorraine, which is a part of France.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wound up in Stuttgart, Germany, when the war ended. Then I was assigned to an outfit that were for looking for downed pilots and to find out where they buried or something like that, the location of their graves. And the one thing that he did do, the Germans buried them in very nice cemeteries. And I got a chance to go up the Inn Valley on the Autobahn to Garmisch-Partenkirchen.
Yeah.
Now, Garmisch-Partenkirchen was a center for the German movie industry. And when the war ended and they were gathering together all these scientists, they assigned that area in chalets there, and that's where they kept them there until they went shipped actually to the United States. I was very fortunate in that trip, so I was able to go see Hitler's window and all that, and various areas along the way. And then something nice happened. The United States government made an agreement with the Irish government, which of course was neutral during the war, that anybody with Irish relatives could get a pass and go to Ireland. You didn't need a passport. All you had to show was orders that you were allowed to go. So I spent about 2.5 months in Ireland, and then came back.
Really? Not a short time. Long.
I don't think nobody knew where anybody was after the war was ended in Europe. It was chaos. There was no industries, nothing. Young people used to go around to army camps to see if they could help in messes and stuff like that. So I visited there for almost 2.5 months, and then I came back into Europe, into the mainland of Europe, and it was eventually shipped out to go to the United States. Actually, our outfits the war in the Far East was still going on, so they transferred quite a number of fellas from Europe over to the Far East.
Pacific Theater?
To the Pacific area. Yeah. Some of those boats that were going over, the war ended, then they came back without even landing there. And then I was busted out in 1946.
1946.
Go home.
That's an excellent summary, Philip. Now we're going to go back.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to ask you to give some details.
Yeah.
Now, you were drafted.
Right.
Do you remember, how old were you when you were drafted?
21.
21. Do you remember being drafted? What was going through your mind? Was it an obligation? Was it?
Well, it was compulsory. Well, you know, they set up draft boards. And when you're down, you're given a number, and then you're told the day to report to a base down in New York City, and sent out Yaphank, which was a staging area for draftees from New York City. And then, fortunately, I was able to land without going to any boot camp. I was sent down to Anacostia, just outside Washington.
No basic training.
But no basic training.
Basic training.
The one question when they had the interview after passing the test, they say, "Why do you want to be an officer?" Which I thought was a crazy question. Why? Because you would be in a better position.
Yeah.
After all, when we were enlisted men, you were getting $21 a day, once a month. So, of course, there was an increase in salary. And my father had died soon after I was inducted. And my mother was alone at home. My brother was there. And I had a twin brother who was drafted twice, but when it got down to the draft board, it was canceled. So he stayed there in New York for almost the whole war. Mm-hmm. And another brother was drafted, and he went down to, I think it was Fort Sill or someplace, and they found out he was missing an eardrum. So they discharged him.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay. So after becoming an officer, you went down to Florida.
Right.
And what was your job there? What did you do day to day while you were there?
What I was doing down there was training in the school. They're marching you up and down and giving you training on Army protocol and what different sections of it. When you have a base, you have to have transportation officers, you have to have the commissary officers, you have to have all these different states in order to make the base work. That had to be in addition to any pilots who were later brought into the Air Force. So
what was your job? What were you trained at?
Well, I became you bounce from place to place. I was in charge of housing, food, different aspects, and also they had intelligence officers, and that when pilots would come back from a raid or something, they have to identify what they've seen and give their description.
So, if I'm understanding right, your training in Florida was more about how to be an officer, not necessarily how to be a service officer or a officer of mess or.
Well, not active combat, or just running a base, because there's all these things come into play on any base. You have to have transportation, you have to have commissary, you have to have all these units, food supplies, dressing, equipment, those things. And they need those in any base, whether they're Air Force or just a regular camp. Yeah. But then on top of that, the Air Force had to have pilots, and that's why they trained in different places throughout the United States to become pilots.
Which you did not.
Which I did not do. Okay. Let me think of something.
So from Florida, you went to Fort Sill?
No, I didn't go to Fort Sill.
Where did you go after Florida?
After Florida, I was assigned to 3 different places, one right after the other. Because the Air Corps was in sort of a flux position. Mm-hmm. They sent me out to Will Rogers Field, was the first assignment. Then after a month or 2, they shipped me to Jacksonville, Florida, and from Jacksonville, Florida to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And there I was put into a group known as the 4th Fighter Group. We didn't have any combat flyers in the Air Corps at the time. So then an arrangement was made that the young Americans who had gone to England and wanted to become fighter pilots had joined the English Air Force. So they made an agreement in order to get combat flyers that these men could transfer in rank into the Army Air Corps. Now, later on, they decided they should have an Air Force, which would be separate from the Army. And the exact date of that changeover was, I could have to look that up.
Was that while you were in service or after you got out?
No, while I was in service.
It was while you were in service?
Yeah.
For some reason I'm thinking...
See, originally it was the Army Air Corps, which was only part of the Army.
Right.
Then eventually they turned it into an Air Force, so it was a separate unit, as it is today.
And your discharge papers are from the Air Force.
Air Force, right.
Okay. So you went into the invasion in North Africa?
Yes, into Casablanca. Into Casablanca.
Into Casablanca.
Yeah. And Bogart wasn't there.
No. Yes, all right. What was your role? Tell me about that.
Well,
experience.
As I explained to you, you have different positions in there, and supply and all those things. And each base we had to set those things up. And when across North Africa, I was in Oran, Algiers, outside of Bizerti, where there was a big battle, and then into Tunisia. So people don't realize what happened during the war was that they needed people in such a hurry after December 7th. They established these schools, like I said, to this 90-day wonder school. But they also, people who got direct commissions were sent down to the Air Corps place in Florida, and they went through to learn the protocol too. And some other fella, one man that was a pilot that was sent down there was Clark Gable. Of course, he was a pilot on his own, and he began it. And while I was at that school in Florida, Hank Greenberg was going through at the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
He later became a he put it at the units, public units, for building up the Air Force and all that kind of stuff. The war effort, and encouraged people who weren't drafted to volunteer. So he got into that kind of a unit himself.
Oh, really? And what was his name again?
Hank Greenberg.
Oh, Greenberg. Okay.
Yeah, he was a young Jewish boy from Brooklyn who the Yankees didn't take when they should have.
Yeah. Okay. So you were part of the 324th Fighting Group,
right?
And they're where were they at, and where did you go with them?
The outfit that I went to North Africa was the 4th Fighter Group, and was then turned around and renamed the 350th Fighter Group.
350th.
And then across North Africa. The later outfit I got to was different. It came down around Africa and came in through Egypt with another way, and then fought up into North Africa. And from there went into the invasion of Italy and to France.
And you went into St. Joseph, France.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Along the Mediterranean. Well, we were sent in little bits of French boats, actually, for the landing. And Corsica is an island of mountains. It's a very prescribed, because Napoleon was born there, in Ajaccio. But it was an interesting place to be.
So you went into St. Joseph, France.
In one of the invasions into southern France. And what we hit into was a road going up to Lyon, which I think is the Rhone Valley. And we went straight up to Lyon, and stopped at different areas as they progressed along. Of course, they had captured so much, then they put it in a temporary airfield, and then we're going to cross eastward through Alsace-Lorraine, and I wound up in an assignment to Stuttgart, Germany, to a German airfield, beautiful airfield, a commercial airfield. And that's where actually the fighting end of the war was over. And then they went on this, what that was like, a graves registration, they were called. They went around and found out what different pilots might have gone down and what happened to their bodies and traced them that way. Mm-hmm. But we found that most of the men that were shut down in southern Germany were buried by the Germans in Newton graveyards.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in my trip that eastward, I went through the Valley, beautiful valley in Germany. I was able to stop and look at Hitler's window.
And where was that at exactly?
I don't forget the name of it. What was it? You see many pictures about Hitler's window. So I have a couple of pictures of it. And then along the Autobahn, I had taken several pictures of planes that were destroyed by the Germans when the war was ended.
Their own planes?
Oh, their own planes. Some American planes, but a lot of them. I have pictures showing the different places where they put the plane in the semi-forestry areas along the Autobahn.
They were chests.
Hmm?
The chests, the desert
well, some of them might have been chests because the Germans had started, we'll get jet flights, but what happened was they lost out on fuel. They didn't have enough fuel to back it up.
So, how did you stay in touch with family? You were going all over the place there. How did you manage to keep in touch with family? Or did you have much communication?
There was always a mail service. Mm-hmm. I'd take long, but most of the places I got to, there was mail service, so I was sent back that way.
What was life like as far as personal life, food and so on while you're in the service during the war with all the moving?
We were in the services, so of course the food is whatever they supplied. The commissary outfits come up and you had to order food and things like that. See, what's happened today is a much different thing. You don't have cooks in the army anymore because it's all done by contract. Everything you do now is on a contract, and they supply people, they supply the food, they do this. You don't have those separate units in each group or squadron.
Surely during your time in service you felt stress?
Well, at times you get a little lonely.
Yeah.
Because I was overseas almost 5 years.
Long time. Yeah. Long time to be overseas.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Well, say your prayers and live on. And there were places to see. You couldn't travel too much away from the bases that you were on. But you did. I got into Paris and I got into a couple of those towns like that. And Rome. And that's about my history.
Now, did you see any USO shows or anything while you were there?
Oh, yeah. Well, Bob Hope made several visits to Africa. Mm-hmm. And he also went into Europe itself. And there were other units that used to go and give types of shows and things like that.
Did you get to see any of them though? Did you yourself
I seen Bob Hope at least once.
You did?
Yeah. Of course, all the units were brought into a central place where they put up a stage. And of course, he had the movie starlets and all that kind of thing. Which was a morale bender.
Yeah, definitely. So, you said you went to Ireland.
Yes.
Got to go, what, for 2.5 months?
Yeah. Because I had, my father was the only one of his family, which was a large family, that ever came to the United States. And my mother was from a rather small family, too. And she was from Cavan. My father was from Cork. So that I had a lot of relatives living in Ireland by the time I went there to visit. Lots of cousins.
Yeah.
And an aunt and uncle who's still alive. So.
You were able to see all of them. You were able to find them.
Yeah.
Anything unusual or anything
well,
particularly exciting?
Of course, they were excited that an American came because the McGrath name was slowly fading away in Ireland because my uncles, there's only one of them actually had a son, and he was married to a niece of Michael Collins, who was a big hero of the Irish Revolution. And so that when I came there, I was a brand new thing with the name McGrath.
Well, you must have enjoyed it. You stayed there for quite a while.
Oh yeah. There was nothing doing in Europe.
Yeah.
They're moving people around, whether they're going to ship them overseas, they're going to all that.
Right. How did you feel about your fellow officers or servicemen?
Well, they were, a lot of them were interesting characters. One guy who came from West Virginia, and he would always say, not West Virginia, West by God, Virginia.
Really?
And I had one, in the 324th, we had a doctor by the name of John Dorger, who was an excellent doctor.
What was his name again?
John Dorger.
Dorger?
Yeah. One time there was a plane taken off with they had bombs under the wings of the fighter planes. And whatever happened, the bomb dropped and went off. And they were workmen fixing up the end of the airport. And of course, when the darn thing went off, a lot of people were very badly injured, a lot killed them. But he was calm, ended this whole thing. One experience I had with him, when we went to Lyon, we met two girls who lived in Scarsdale, New York. Their father was something in the French aviation, and we went to see them. And in fact, we spent a Christmas with them, Eve with them. And they were going back, and because it was snowing and everything, icy roads, and we were in Jeeps. We had 3 Jeeps going along, guys, and I'm watching this Jeep ahead of me. That's the best way to watch the taillights. And all of a sudden, it made a left-hand turn. I said, there's no left-hand turn there. And when we got to it, it was the guy that was steering, was the driver of the Jeep, was a fellow from Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Never driven in ice and snow. And when he hit the wooden bridge, he skidded and went over on top of the old bridge that was blown out. Luckily enough, we got him out of there, and we found a small medical unit that was so bad. We gave him some shots. Actually, they gave him cocaine or something, to what the pain. And when he got back to our base where we were stationed, of course, they were all celebrating the Christmas and New Year's, and the doctor was running around, and he's running around. I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? He says, my hands are cold. If I touch him on the stomach, because that's what's happened, his rib has pierced his lung. And if I hit him, he'll tighten up on me. And that's what his diagnosis was correct. Of course, then they got him to a field hospital right away.
Wow. So, what were some of your other Christmases like?
Well, you always find some place to go.
Yeah.
You'd have a Christmas in Corsica, I think, in Alsace. And they were not too, maybe you'd have a chaplain would be saying mass and things like that. Just because you'd be thinking about what, they had that one, they wanted a quiet Christmas.
Yeah. Did you keep a journal at all?
Well, I kept all the orders I had. I kept all the orders that I got for the most part.
You didn't keep any personal journal?
No, didn't write. Just memories.
Just memories. Okay. So the war ended. You were around Stuttgart?
Yes.
And
that's when I took the trip to Ireland. After I had done this with Graves registration work. And then when I come back, my outfit was going to be shipped back to the United States. So, of course, then I arrived in Fort Dix. And I had a twin brother who was drafted late in the war. Of course, even in 1945, the war was still going on in the Pacific, and they were still taking people on a draft. And he got assigned to an intelligence outfit of some sort. And when I got to Fort Dix, I called up my mother, and I said, "Where's my brother?" And she says, "He's in Fort Dix." I said, "Do you know the outfit?" So she gave me the name of the outfit and everything, because she was able to communicate with him a lot. And I walked into the barracks he was in. It was at night. And of course, I had an Army officer's uniform on. And they said, "What are you doing in that thing? How did you get that stuff?" Of course, he was an identical twin.
He what?
He was an identical twin.
Yeah. But he was in the state sergeant.
And he spent all his time traveling. He was chauffeuring a former police captain around who was assigned to something in the Army, and he'd go up to West Point and go to the restaurants up there and come back again. I said, what kind of nonsense is this?
So from Fort Dix, is that where you mustered out?
Yes.
They left the service?
They left the service, yes.
And did you have any education benefits or anything after you?
Well, then the GIB I went through. I started back to Fordham University, and then went to law school, and eventually became an attorney.
You did?
Now I'm living with my son, who's taking care of me.
Yeah, there you go.
I've had numerous operations, so I slowed down.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's unfortunate as we get old.
Oh.
Well, tell me, your service, how do you think it impacted your life? Do you think it had much of an impact?
I think it gave you well, you met so many people and you visited so many places that were historic in a way. And it was like an education, and thank God my memory is fairly good. And though my body is slowly going downhill. So I've had a fairly good life. I got married in 1954 and we had 7 children. And my wife was a very active person. And in the end she got pancreatic cancer, which is deadly.
Well, let me ask you just one more question as far as your service. Had you been involved in any organizations after you got out, like the VFW? Or?
Well, I joined the American Legion, and of course I joined the Knights of Columbus, and found out that the Legion does a lot of very, very good work, and what I found out in later years with these other wars that stuff like that you don't find people joining. I think a lot of outfits feel that people today are not joiners in that type of organization.
Did you have any reunions? Go to any reunions?
Well, there's an outfit that was formed of officers for the 324th and 350th, but they were always away, distance away, like some of them in Texas, and they couldn't get around to.
Well, Philip, is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't discussed here? Anything? Any
No, I think we did pretty good.
I'm sorry?
I think I led a fairly good life and had a wonderful wife and very good children, as you can see with my son Matthew here. One of them who actually had, at 17 years of age, he decided to go into the Navy. He didn't want to go to college. And spent 7 years on the high seas.
Mm-hmm.
And when he finally got out, he got a position with Harvard University, though he hadn't gone to college. And what he was doing was handling their real estate. So he was an officer in Harvard.
Really? Wow. And that was one of your sons?
Yeah.
That was one, yeah.
Yeah. Brendan. And he was in the Navy, and he was in the captain, and the captain said, "Brendan, what kind of a name is that?" He says, "Brendan. Brendan's the guy that discovered America." Brendan the Navigator.
All right, well, Philip, I want to thank you for your service.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for allowing me to come here and sit with you.
I hope it gives you some information.